Hello, welcome back. I hope everyone is doing well. Um, for today will be our first lecture of I think four lectures on the Buddhist traditions. And so let me share my screen with you and we will get started. All right, 1 second. Okay, so for today, what I want to do, and this is something we did, in a similarly in a similar way with the Hindu tradition. We'll follow the same pattern with the Jewish, Christian, and Muslim traditions. Is I want to have our first lecture to be on the origins and focus on the geographical location, focus on the origin story, and give a general summary of the tradition. Okay, and so we're going to do that today. Let's get started with our conversation on the Buddhist traditions. Okay, so this is an overview just in terms of numbers and distribution, the founder, the deities, and the authoritative text within the tradition. So by the numbers, most estimates range between 200 and 300 million Buddhists throughout the world in terms of where Buddhists live throughout the whole world, obviously, but generally you have greater concentrations in South Asia and in Southeast Asia. And then you have Buddhist minority groups across the world, basically. The founder, who we'll talk about, will have a whole lecture devoted to the Buddha. Our second lecture of four lectures on the Buddhist traditions will be devoted to the Buddha. But the founder is Shakyamuni Buddha, who taught in northern India approximately about 2,500 years ago, and is believed to be the most recent along a whole line of Buddhas. Okay, so Shakyamuni is the Buddha we'll be focusing on in our class together. In terms of deities, the Buddha is venerated as a fully enlightened human being, but he's not considered God in the way the concept God is understood in the Jewish tradition or the Christian tradition or the Islamic tradition. But he's this venerated being who's given a lot of respect, and his teachings are followed closely because they are believed to contain eternal wisdom. Now, it's going to vary from one tradition to the next with regards to um, the understanding of deity and the possibility of deities. So there's three major vehicles or three major traditions that are part of the Buddhist traditions. The earliest is the Theravada tradition, which emphasizes just the Buddha. But when you get to the Mahayana tradition or the Mahayana vehicle, which is the second of the three vehicles or traditions, you get the emergence of this doctrine called the three body doctrine. And within that doctrine, the way the Buddha is understood very much has this kind of cosmic sense to the Buddha, which very much lends itself to sounding similar to a deity of sorts. And then you have the third vehicle, the Vajrayana tradition, which is concentrated in Nepal, which has its own beliefs as well. So, like all the traditions we talk about, there's diversity within the Buddhist tradition, but here we're wanting to give a general summary and overview to introduce the Buddhist tradition, and we'll walk forward into some of the details as we progress forward. Authoritative texts, just like conceptions or understandings of the possibility of a deity, and there's different understandings of what texts are deemed authoritative and sacred across the three major vehicles. So with Theravada Buddhism, which is the earliest of the three vehicles or traditions, which is concentrated in South Asia and Southeast Asia, this earliest tradition exclusively holds to only the three baskets or the Tripitaka as being authoritative. The Mahayana tradition or the Mahayana vehicle, it has a variety of texts in various languages, including Chinese, Japanese, and Tibetan, which are deemed authoritative within the Mahayana tradition. And it should be said in the Mahayana tradition, which is more concentrated going towards, say, China and towards Korea and towards Japan, so towards like East Asia in that direction, you'll get more of a concentration of Mahayana Buddhism. There's massive diversity within this vehicle itself. So there's Zen Buddhism, for example, and there's Pure Land Buddhism, for example, and other forms of Buddhism that are that rest under, that belong to the Mahayana vehicle. So again, there's great diversity that is embedded within these different vehicles in the tradition at large. And then you have the Vajrayana vehicle, the third vehicle, which recognizes the Dalai Lama as the spiritual leader of this tradition. Has its own text. It especially has tantric text within the tradition, which provide kind of esoteric teachings for gaining enlightenment. All right, so getting into the overview, here you have just in terms of, if you look at a map, you can see where the concentration lies in terms of Buddhism. I mentioned Theravada Buddhism emerges and has a strong concentration in Southeast Asia. And of course, the Buddha himself is from Nepal, so he's from up here. But this particular religious tradition, following the Silk Road, basically, it goes in different directions, but it takes different routes and merchant routes, and it spreads its message to Southeast Asia. And then as it moves more in this direction, you get Mahayana Buddhism going upwards into these directions here, from Korea to Japan and into China as well. And then that third vehicle, again, is located primarily, the Vajrayana tradition is located in this area in Nepal. All right, so in terms of the origins of the Buddhist tradition, it emerges during a time. Remember when we talked about the Hindu tradition, we talked about the importance of the Indus River and the Ganges River. These rivers are sacred rivers in the Hindu tradition. So you have this fervent spirituality. There's a lot of kind of spiritual energy and excitement around the Ganges River when the Buddhist tradition emerges as a second option to what already existed in India, which was the Hindu ways of life, what we call the Hindu religion or traditions. All right, so yeah, again, here is just another map kind of detailing, right, where you have the concentration of the Buddhist traditions up to the present day. Okay, so in terms of Ganges spirituality, there's some differences and some similarities in the Ganges spirituality of the Hindu tradition, which precedes the Buddhist tradition, and the Buddhist tradition. What emerges is this type of competition between these two different religious groups that have two different perspectives. So you have the Brahmins, are the Hindus, who are emphasizing rituals and sacrifice. And then you have the ascetics, who are going to be the Buddhists, who are emphasizing spiritual practices. Ascetics comes from the Greek word askesis, which means training. And so the Buddhists emphasizes a kind of a spiritual training, which includes, of course, like meditation, for example, and maybe like following particular dietary rules or some other practices. So it emphasizes training over sacrifice and ritual. So with the Brahmins, the Hindu priests affirm animal sacrifice, the Buddhists emphasize apaya, or self-effort, over supplications and sacrifices to deities. In terms of common ground between the two traditions, karma and reincarnation are commonly held beliefs across Ganges spiritualities. When we say Ganges spiritualities, we're referencing these spiritualities which emerged or which were present already in the case of the Hindu tradition around the Ganges River in the Indian subcontinent. It's important to note in this introductory lecture on the Buddhist traditions that there's two significant Buddhist innovations. One is their teaching on the impermanence of the soul, are the self, and the term is on-atman. So recall with me when we talked about the Hindu traditions, there's a core teaching that each of us has an atman, that we have a soul that is connected to the world and connected to the Brahman, the ultimate God above all the deities and all the avatars in the Hindu tradition. That ideal of the atman, that each of us has an imperishable soul, um, is dismissed, is reinterpreted in the Buddhist tradition to in the teaching in the Buddhist tradition, which contradicts the teaching of the Atman, is called on-Atman. And on-Atman is this teaching that we don't have something core to us. We don't even have a soul, which is essential to us. That everything within us is contingent and changing through space and time. Another innovation within the Buddhist traditions is this emphasis on social egalitarianism. And so there's less hierarchy, although there are hierarchies, and we'll talk about that as we progress, but less emphasis on hierarchy and more on kind of like equality and creating space for a wide range of people to engage in Buddhist spirituality, spiritual practices. Okay. So progressing onwards, there's three gems in the Buddhist tradition, and these are the three like sources of authority, the three sources of eternal wisdom, and the three sources that the Buddhists should orientate their life around. And the three gems are the Buddha, which includes his life and teachings, the Dharma. Dharma in the Hindu tradition, remember, it means duty and it's central. It's the closest word to religion in the Buddhist, in the Hindu tradition. So one must do the Dharma, and we talked about that. Dharma means duty. In the context of the beauty, in the context of the Buddhist traditions, Dharma instead of duty, Dharma means simply teaching. And so that's the second gem. We're going to walk through each of these gems one at a time over the next three lectures. So we'll have one lecture on the Buddha, then we're going to have one on the second gem, which is the Dharma and the teachings of the Buddhist tradition. And then the third, and we'll include a conversation on scriptures and on a couple other teaching points. Then the third gem is the community. Across religious traditions, there's this emphasis on community and what it means to be in community, and then there's discussions and teachings on how we should form community and what types of hierarchies, if any, we should have within the community, and who should be in positions of authority. And so we'll talk about community, the third gem, the Sangha. We'll do that in part by talking about monks and nuns, including talking about different ordination rites and practices that monks and nuns engage in. And also we'll talk about lay people and how lay people engage in their practices of Buddhist spirituality in relationship to the monks and the nuns, are through other means as well, such as pilgrimage and so forth. Okay, so we're gonna stop it there for now. And we'll pick it up next lecture, talking about the first gem of the Buddhist traditions, which is the Buddha himself. All right, take care, and I'll see you soon. Take care. Bye.